Hello and welcome, I'm Oles Garjuk and you're watching Head to Head with UATV. France's Yellow Vest movement has been continuing for an 8th week now. What began in November as demonstrations across the country against fuel taxes has transformed into a broad challenge for French President Emmanuel Macron and his plan for a free market overhaul of France. To discuss what might this result in, we welcome to the studio Dr. Violeta Moskalu, founder of My Ukraine public platform. Hello and thank you for being with us today.
Hello, thank you for inviting.
Yes, thank you. So, Dr. Moskalu, it looks like a real revolution. Any hopes for peace in the new year were quickly dashed when on January 5th a fresh round of nationwide protests started. How many people took to the streets and what happened this last time?
So we saw that the last weekend that the protest of yellow vests it's not finished,
and it continues.
They will continue after the police data on Saturday 5 January. They said that around 50,000 people were outside in Paris, but it also in different regions in France. But actually the protesters themselves, they are not very glad when they hear these numbers because they think that much more people is outside every time when they are protesting, and the police tries to diminish a little bit the importance. But actually this weekend was very specific because on Sunday in Paris and also in different regions we also saw a second protest only by women, French women, and it was really very pacific, no violence at all, and it was really very important and very interesting to observe their slogans and to understand that this year President Macron will be really forced to keep much more attention to all these revendications, because actually I saw the pictures of these women protest on Sunday, and one of the pancart slogan was "Our children will live free, not in your financial dictature." So
not in the dictatorship.
Not in the dictatorship. They speak about in France. They speak actually about the same things that here in Ukraine, where a lot of people are not happy with this oligarchic regime. So in France, people also speak about financial oligarchy, and they are they are contesting against the fact that the politics is done much more towards and closer to the interest of the richest part of the society than the people would want and would wish.
So, as far as I understand, these women, they do have the same demands as all the Yellow Vest protesters.
Exactly, and it was like their initiative was really very interesting because they showed that it's not only radicalization part of the society, and normal people, intellectual people also. Is really French people still support the Yellow Vests protest, and it looks, for me, it's really very interesting to observe. It looks that this protest movement gave the start for the end of the neoliberal ideology, because we saw in different European countries also kind of protests before New Year, and it feels like we feel like it will continue. And
so France provoked this kind of...
Yes, and we can do kind of parallel with French Revolution, when French nation stopped the monarchy and they launched the Republic, the French Republic. And also later in May 1968, also French students started protests, and they obtained by 50 years ago, a strong improvement of the working conditions of people, like 35% more for the basic revenue for working people. It was like one of the results of May 68 revolution in France. So now it looks like French nation is once more a kind of pioneer, giving attention that our global system should be reformed, because it's not normal that, for example, 82% of resources on a global level are kept in the hands of 1% of people only. Or, for example, the eight richest persons in the world detained the half of our global resources. Or, for example, in France, 21 persons have the same wellness, financial wellness, like 40% of French society, of the whole country.
Which is very tragic, yes.
Yeah, it's like it cannot continue like this. So it's very interesting to see that we have two crises, at least, like neoliberal ideology, we can see, we can anticipate now kind of end of really strong crisis, and also crisis for the representative democracy, because a lot of revendications or like French yellow vests are against kind of privilege, kind of the member of parliament.
Yes, high-ranked officials. Yes.
Yes, or also they are against a big part of the French media, because they also feel like this media is much more closer to this dominant ideology, pro-rich, like pro-financial and economic institutions.
How does the government react to these demands?
As for now, we are a little bit sad to see that my own feeling is like they didn't get it completely, entirely, and it would be really very important to observe the next weeks and the next months, because I understand French nation very well. I spent a lot of years working, doing my studies and working and as a university professor in teaching, teacher of management in France, and I understand that they are, it's like their DNA. They are able to continue, and at this stage it's absolutely difficult to think that yellow vests will stop. So, and the government, unfortunately, they try to pay more attention on this problem, actually, of the radicalization of a part of the movement, because in France and in other countries also there are some different groups of radical young people, guys, trying to take some benefit of this kind of protests. But for now, the yellow vests are really very focused on asking for more direct democracy, with kind of direct citizenship referendum. But
let's discuss what is this direct democracy, because in mid-December, following weeks of this protest, protest, Emmanuel Macron was forced to make some concessions. So he cancelled this controversial fuel tax rise. He promised extra cash for minimum wage earners, and he promised tax cuts for pensioners. But looks like people want more, right? What can you forecast?
It's about the crisis.
What are the main demands that are very crucial for them?
This crisis of neoliberal ideology, because French Republic, its slogan is like freedom, equality, and this feeling of unfairness, of inequity, like on a fiscal justice. They ask for more fiscal justice, and also it's this crisis of representative democracy, because for example, one of the point is ask of the yellow vests. They ask for less taxes on all the products of first necessity.
Yes, the essential products.
Yes, and for less privilege. How do you say? Privileges for all kind of representatives, like for member of parliament. Because Emmanuel Macron, during his presidential campaign, he made some big, like he advanced. He spoke about the need of moralization of the political life.
Of the governance.
Yes, of the governance system. So French were waiting for some strong initiatives in this area, but actually they were disappointed by kind of too close on like kind of right politics, and he forgot that all his campaign was based on free the economy, and so give more opportunities to develop startups and to develop startup nation, but also to protect the part of the society that needs to be protected. And actually, we didn't see it, this part of protection, for example, so after he got elected.
I understand. Well, as far as I know, the response from the government to the yellow vest protesters was really poor. But on the other hand, President Emmanuel Macron was inviting people to participate in the debate, but protesters have rejected it, right? And instead, they presented an open letter outside of the Paris City Hall. And I have a quote from this letter. "Anger will turn into hate if from your pedestal you and your like treat ordinary people like beggars, the toothless, those who are nothing." Though the tone of this letter is pretty aggressive, and also the letter says, quote, "We will go further." So how far do you think can they go?
President Macron proposed a kind of national debate that have to start during January months and until March or April, and we will have a kind of national debate. But the protesters are angry because of lack of satisfactory answers President Macron gave until now. So, and we saw on Saturday, January 5, that there were the first kind of much more radicalized activities, because part of a group of the protesters entered in one ministry in Paris, also in one prefecture, in one region. So I really hope that the government of Emmanuel Macron will be able to show much more biggest capacity to hear and,
yes,
and
some understandings of the demands of these people.
And much more consideration for these people, because, for example, during his speech before on December 31, Emmanuel Emmanuel Macron spoke about full news about the yellow vests with a kind of not enough consideration. It was like also just underline the radicalization of a part of the movement, but it's like I don't know, 1% of people who can be accused for kind of radicalization. But for example, in December, I don't remember which weekend, we saw 500,000 people outside in Paris and also in different regions. So it should be taken with much more consideration.
Yes, and put much more attention to it, because this is almost a revolution.
And also this Saturday, last weekend, they started to develop a kind of new structure for this movement, and it's also a very important point because in Marseille they organized a kind of assembly and trying to find a group of people who can be kind of representatives and to organize
this movement.
Yes, an online platform to gather together all kind of revendications, like of messages or all ideas of the yellow vests, and to try to make some synthesis and to develop a kind of
collect,
program.
Analyze, and produce some
in a much more
demands.
Proactive way. So it's also a point to underline, for the beginning of this new wave of yellow vests.
This is very important, actually, because I was just about to ask, why don't French people continue this protest with some kind of leadership? Why don't they select leaders? Because it looks like every protest, it is easier to continue, and it is more effective when there are some certain people who represent the whole group of demonstrators, right? And they have some list of points by points demands. So as far as I understand, this assembly will work on this list?
Yes, they will start. It's like interesting to observe how they try to avoid different kind of manipulation, and this we also have a kind of crisis of trust towards leaders and all this leadership. It looks like French yellow vests are looking for a new kind of leadership, for a leadership much more inclusive, and try to find people able to be more humble, so not to try to control, but just to express and to be like the voice of all kind of initiatives and ideas. And it's also interesting to observe how they can organize their yellow vest movement in a kind of horizontal way, because the 21st century will not be a vertical. People don't like this kind of organizations, like with too much control, and they want a new form of institutions.
They want to make it smoother.
Yes, and it's interesting to observe it also in Ukraine here. So we can underline some similar new trends that will be very interesting to develop for next months and next years.
Probably this is a change in mentality also. Well, yes. This is very interesting. Your comments are really interesting. Let's continue observing how the situation will keep unfolding. So far, I thank you for these interesting information that you shared with us, and thank you for being a guest today in our studio.
Thank you for having me.
That was Dr. Violeta Moskalu, founder of My Ukraine public platform. Thank you for watching Head to Head, and stay tuned for more with UATV.